not on the agenda, but he wanted to when we get for an opportunity to
Okay.
get some more information. Sorry, we're on camera now. This is the August 4th regularly scheduled meeting of the Athens City Planning Commission. It is 2:33, I think. I can't see that far. And we do not have a quorum, only Mayor Abel and myself are present, but we don't have any cases to take care of, so it doesn't really matter. And we do have communications. We need to recognize that we have those. And I think there's a citizen who wants to speak to an issue that is not on the agenda. And then we also are going to discuss our plans for how we're going to go through the city plan and add those houses that Jim Phillips wants.
See, what's that address on Hudson again?
Okay. Why don't we, instead of going through these, alter the order of this and go down to opportunity for citizens to speak?
Certainly.
Okay, is that okay? So you have things you want to, you can come up and identify yourself there and tell us what you're, you can give her any of that extra.
First, see to that.
Well, good afternoon. My name's Mike Moritz, and I've been here before and been to a couple of the county planning meetings. I'm requesting to split my property at 5686 Glen Drive. Some of the information that was presented last time in a communication from the County Planning Commission that resulted in a negative vote for me was found to be not quite as accurate as hopefully what I want to let you folks know today. Last time they said that there were 7 addresses, 7 properties that accessed Glen Drive, and I believe you can only have 4 on a private road. It was found that there are actually only 5 accesses onto Glen Drive, and 2 of the 5 do have public road frontage. They do access Glen Drive, but they do also have public road frontage. And in talking with the county planner and the folks at the county meeting, we felt that, and a couple folks were there, if I speak incorrectly, go ahead and correct me. We felt that my split would result in 4 properties not having public access frontage. They felt that that would be acceptable, given a few stipulations. One of them would be to ensure that everybody on the road realized that it was also a public right-of-way for utilities and emergency services to maintain, upgrade, and provide services now and in the future. A formal maintenance agreement for the road, that the neighbors would all agree to my plan for splitting my property, and that the health department would inspect and say that the 2 septic systems that exist there would be okay. The last 2 pages of the handout that I gave you are, I didn't bring them up with me, but they're the lot split description and a road maintenance agreement. As of right now, I've got 2 signatures on the original, and I've got 1 verbal that I haven't gotten a signature back yet, but I talked to the gentleman in person, and I've got his verbal and his telephone number. He said he didn't have a problem. He just has not returned my fax yet with his signature. The 4th individual that I would need to get a signature from, I've attempted to contact this individual several times and actually tried to chase him down a couple times, and he really, I don't think I'm going to get his signature, not due to the fact that he's against it or for it in any way. This individual just doesn't want to be bothered with anybody or anything. And I really think if this is going to go, it would end up going without that individual's signature, because I don't think I'm going to get it. The portion of the road that his property fronts on is all the way at the very end, and it only accounts for maybe 50 feet. It's not very much of the road, and I volunteer to take care of that part. But, so I've almost got all of the names for the two papers, the agreement for everybody, that they agree with me splitting my lot, and that it's not gonna bother them or interfere with them at all, and also the road maintenance agreement. Within those two documents that I wrote up, there's a part, and I made sure I stressed to everybody that they read that part, that Glen Drive is a right-of-way for utilities and also the use of the public, and so they all know that and understand it. I don't have anything from the health department. I've contacted them today to see if they had came out and looked. Chuck Hammer, I ended up leaving a message with him, and I haven't heard anything back from them yet. So I am making progress on it, and I haven't read the communication from the county planning commission, but when I left, they had voted in favor.
We have a copy of it here in the file. That's one of the communications we received.
Does anybody have any questions for me?
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll have to read through this. I mean, I was on the Regional Planning Commission also, and I had pointed out that the easements that really, if they aren't, we didn't know if they were there or not. They may all exist, currently, but I think part of it also was just to let all the current property owners know, if they do this, we're supposedly at the maximum. They can't come in 6 months and say, oh, well, I've got extra property on mine, I want to do it too.
And
there has to be an end at some point when you're at a private drive, that there has to be a maximum number before you have to make it a public right-of-way, in my mind. Because
Yeah,
it just gets, the more people you
stipulations.
get, the harder it is to get them to all agree.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the stipulations, and it is wrote into one of those two papers, that this would be the final
Yeah.
split of any property on Glen Drive. And I made sure that they all knew that and understood it. And so far, three out of the four signed without any hesitation, and the fourth individual, like I said, I doubt that I will get his signature.
And by the four that you're meaning, Mike, is that those that actually don't have any other public frontage? Glen Drive, in essence, is their frontage road?
The three that I have signatures from are the individuals that have no public road frontage.
Right.
The individual that I can't get the signature from is an individual that has public road frontage. The
Right.
driveway access is Glen Drive, but they've got quite a bit of road frontage across the front of their property,
Right.
on Burke Drive.
Okay. Well, I'll read through it.
Okay. We can't take any action on it, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
But we can schedule this
We
probably
can
for-
schedule it
for
on
next
the
meeting.
next meeting, so we can do it, but we can't take any action today. But you should make arrangements to be put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Did I call Melissa to do that?
Melissa or Steve?
Do
Either
one
one.
of them.
Let's put it on.
Put that
Well, we
on
have to
here.
decide yet when the next meeting is.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the next regular meeting, Peg's out of town now a month, and I will be out of town that
She'll
week.
be back on the 15th, she said.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be going that week.
I don't know about you people who do nothing but run around.
Vacations are good.
Okay, we'll go back now to, I'm skipping the part of the planning commission to discuss the comprehensive plan till the end, please. We have a communication about the Hawk Hawking Adina Bikeway. We have a brochure. We have several communications from Burgess and Nyepel concerning Campus Edge Apartments, Blackburn Woods, and Blackburn Woods. And another Campus Edge. So we have, well, other than noting that we have them, there's nothing we can do with them. And there isn't anybody here to answer any questions, is there, if we have any? And there's not a lot there to read. Does everybody have a copy of these
Right.
letters?
I've gone through, I've read
Okay.
them all.
Okay.
I've got another communication on it.
Okay, well, I haven't had, I just got these, so I haven't read them all, so I will have to read them. Yes, sir. Was it my nasty letter to you, or was it some other letter?
I don't remember that letter.
Maybe I haven't sent it yet. I'm thinking about sending you a nasty letter. I usually don't mail them after I think about them.
Tom Lovedahl, the developer of Blackburn Woods, sent a letter to me, which is the fourth page in of this document. And it explains that because of those numerous letters from Burgess and Nyepel, some corrections that had to be made and some upgrades required by the city sewer department, that he has overrun his budget by $80,000 as projected for the project. And what he would like to do is to add, he says he'd like to add a lot or two to the subdivision in order to try to recoup those costs. And the last page, he just shows one additional lot, even though in the letter it says possibly two. The cover letter is just something that I sent back to him because Mr. Lovedahl wondered what the process was to amend a final plat. And I attached two sections of the subdivision regulations related to that. One simply says that any change to an approved plat must be submitted to the Planning Commission. It doesn't say reviewed or approved, it just says submitted. And then another section says that the Planning Commission shall specify requirements and procedures for amending a final plat. Those are pages 2 and 3 of this document. So, in trying to answer Mr. Lovedahl's question, how do I amend a final plat? The subdivision regs don't specifically say how you do that. It just says that the Planning Commission will have a procedure and requirements for that. So there was no way that I could give him an answer. I talked to Bob Eichenberg a little bit about this today. If the Planning Commission is considering some procedures or requirements, Bob had some ideas, such as add no more than 3 lots or 10% of the lots platted, that it then be just considered a minor change and not a major change that had to go through the whole process. Say if you had a 25-lot subdivision, you could add 2 lots then, because 3 would be more than 10% of what was previously approved. But again, that's up to the commission. And to be honest with you, I never caught this with the review of the subdivision regs, that the Planning Commission would come up with procedures for this. So I told Tom as soon as we came up with that, why?
If we come up with that.
We let him know how to proceed.
Well, is he just splitting a lot, or what? I mean,
How's he get
this
extra
proposed
lots?
extra lot, it's got to come from other lots. There's no
Right.
new land.
Right, it looks to me like, let's see. Actually, I haven't looked at the plat that was approved to figure out where this extra lot that he calls it
Right.
came from.
Because another
That's
way of
something
doing
that
it
we'll
is that if you sell that one lot, it's big enough to be 2, you could do a lot split. I mean, a private property owner could.
If it were not part of their covenants and restrictions for the subdivision, that additional subdivision was not allowed without consent of everyone in the subdivision. Minor lot splits, where it's just transferred to adjoining property owner, a lot of times are described in covenants and restrictions of a subdivision as being permissible without the entire ownership of the subdivision's approval. In a case like that too, at the current time, Mr. Lovedahl owns all the lots, so.
I
all he has to
understand
do is-
that. I guess I'm just trying to, I don't know what all the conditions he has in this subdivision are, but I was just thinking in the Ohio Revised Code, minor is considered, you know, and when you're splitting 4 off, right? And if he's talking of 2, I mean, that's, but I don't really want to encourage that, because
Right.
when you go through the subdivision process, that should be your full intent. But I can understand that you get in so far and your costs are such that you get to a point that if unexpected things come up, as he's pointing out, your lot price would get too high for the market to bear.
Right. I think Ms. Prisley had mentioned that there were 5 or 6 communications from Burgess and Eiffel related to Blackburn Woods, and that's, if you read those, that's what's driving this.
Yeah.
plus
Well, I
requirements
understand
in
that.
that part.
Well, that's what he says, and you can see that. He only shows one lot on this, whereas he said 2, and then he only shows.
He just
one.
gave an example.
That's
just an
in his
example.
Well, in his letter, as I read it at least, attached is a sketch showing one possible extra lot location. What is the process I need to follow to add lots to the subdivision? So he hasn't,
He hasn't said.
doesn't have where he's
doesn't
gonna
have-
do it.
No, this is just.
But this was an example. What I didn't see in the example is was it merging, taking 2 lots and making them 3? What was it? Or were we just splitting one? And I know we had some concerns of this as to the access points into South Blackburn Road,
Right.
because it's hilly and windy depending upon where you put that driveway.
Yeah.
It could be a blind curve. So what you're saying though, Steve, is that the current subdivision code doesn't say how to do it.
Right. It says that the planning commission will, let's see, procedures and requirements for changing a planning commission approved final plat, signed, unsigned, recorded, or unrecorded, shall be specified by the commission in keeping with the spirit, intent, and purpose of the regulations. So I suppose
How about
a
you
review
can't
of
do
the
it?
spirit, intent, and purpose of the regulations, with the purpose really has been most of the discussion here. So, I guess really to me is, at a certain point, we're gonna have to say amendment to a final plat has got to go through the whole process again. Is it
Well-
that important, if somebody wants to just add 1 lot, is it that important that it go through the whole planning procedure?
I would think 1 wouldn't, but I think if you get more than 1, you probably should.
Well, I might want to ask the law director some thoughts on this, just from the standpoint, because it says a planning commission approved final plat. And we're in the context in the subdivision regulations there. I mean, does this mean, you can always amend it up to when we finally adopt it. So this is after it's already adopted, but it doesn't reference has it been approved by council or not.
Right, this section is the very last on the approval process, and the city council involvement sections are prior to this. I didn't copy all of those
Yeah.
pages. And it might be a good question for the law director too, plus it's, how much, is it necessary as administrators of the subdivision regs that the planning commission not be able to approve minor modifications without going back to the council? And I'm sure
Well, it
council
doesn't
will have
even
an
talk
opinion on
about
that, too.
minor or major, does it?
No, it doesn't.
In this.
No, it doesn't at all.
So what we're looking for is legally from the law director, what are our options? What will the law allow us to, because can we break it into minor changes, major changes? Because I can see that, there are some things when you get into road construction and everything else that, yes, there's some minor changes of moving something 20 feet, which makes it close, that 50-foot right-of-way really should be shoved somewhere else. And that is a modification, but to me, that's a minor modification based upon actual construction details. We aren't to that stage yet in this one.
No, not at all.
We're just in the stage saying the developer, the owner of the property is saying, this process is costing me more money than I thought, and that will make the lots more expensive than the market will bear.
Right.
in their
Mr. Love,
belief.
there's no proposed change to the street alignment, the way the street's constructed, the water sewer lines, the stormwater detention ponds, none of those things are changing. It's just simply adding 2 lines on a drawing, is what he's proposing right now. But again, I had to tell him that I didn't know for sure what that procedure was.
Well, we need to get an opinion from the law director. Right? Did you have more?
Yeah, I've got 2 more that just came in today. and they're both related to the same project, not Blackburn Woods. These two documents are from the Ohio EPA related to the Walnut Grove subdivision. The letter dated August 2nd is to the developer, noting a compliance inspection conducted by the EPA and citing some deficiencies and violations of their stormwater discharge permit. So that's the document dated August 2nd and addressed to Ken Schwartzel, although I don't know who that is.
Kevin.
Probably Kevin. The second one is dated August 1st, and this one is to Paul Marr, the project engineer, and it's essentially a correction letter on the submittal for the permit to install for the sewage treatment system. And it's fairly extensive. I did talk to Mr. Marra this morning, and he said that, a correction letter like this, although this one looks very long, complicated, like there's a lot of problems, are really just a lot of details that the EPA does get involved in.
Well, isn't that what they're supposed to do?
That is exactly what they're supposed to do.
So the detail is important.
So this thing is, it's got
It's
60 or
pages
70
long.
items on it. So it's pretty
Well, they'll have
extensive review of
to
this
take
stuff.
care of those, right?
So I would say that it'll be a little while before these things are all addressed, and therefore it would seem a while yet before Walnut Grove developers would be back asking for final plat approval.
Okay, you have any more?
That's it.
That's it, okay. The other ones from Burgess and Nyepel pertain to Campus Edge. Are they coming back again?
Well, they're under an extension right now, I think.
Right.
But I thought they wanted another extension, or they just want
To my recollection, Mr. Dowdy had come in and asked for a 3-month
a
extension
3-month extension?
that was granted.
Where are we on that?
Well, I'm not real sure, but it's been
It's been off, it must be.
a couple months ago.
Yeah, I would think it's probably up by now, isn't it?
So I've had no further communication with Mr. Dowdy or with PRS Development, the project developers. So, I don't know where we're at for sure.
It's a
The
four-
time,
the
the
letter
clock is
says
ticking and time's running
The
out.
fourth, second submission, I don't know how you determine that. It's the fourth, second submission. That means something. It's got lots of things on it that need to be done. No? Okay. All right. All right, now, did any other citizen want to say something before we take up this little thing over here? And the next meeting is scheduled for the 18th, but you can't come, is that right?
I'll be out of town.
Hey, who else will be out of town? Do you know?
No, I'm not for sure.
Peg will be back, she told me to be back the 15th. So, I guess we have to operate under the assumption that a regular scheduled meeting will be held if we can get we want to make sure there's a quorum because he wants to bring his things, so, okay? And if that won't work, then we'll have to postpone it. All right, now, we need to start making our plans for doing the comprehensive plan. And what we had discussed at an earlier, the members of the commission had discussed at an earlier meeting before we had the copy of the plan, that we would divide it up. Rick and I are on the committee, so we have been through this.
A couple times.
Through it a lot. But the other members of the commission have not, so we have to give them time to do it. Now, they all have it, and what we've decided we would do, we would divide it up everybody, we expect everybody to read it all, but that each of us would be responsible for 5 chapters where we go into great detail, and that would be our, and if there are any questions that need to be resolved, or any information we need to bring in, or anything like that, or, and some of them, I know Peg picks the things that were her particular interest in the work she's done on economic development and that, so she's picked out some of those. And she's taken hers with her to Montana, and she will have it ready when she gets back here. Rick has picked his out too. I haven't picked mine out. I have a question. There are things in here that people in the city, I mean, like the water department and all that kind of thing, people need to look at this.
Yeah.
What have we done about getting them to look at all these things? What have we done?
We're doing it
City.
through the staff meeting
Staff
process. And,
Doesn't I mean, what have you done, not me, you?
right, and I've asked each of them to come into the office. We have it on disc, etc. They can then go through their sections and say, are these anywhere near what your 5-year or whatever objectives are for change or improvement, or how would you deal with it? Do you have the resources? Do you have the staff?
Or does it make sense? Is it something that a person in that department would know that we other people wouldn't realize?
Well, there's also a lot of the sections in this that are just so general in nature that they're not a specific area of the plan. And to a certain extent, part of what needs to be done is in the Chapter 9, benchmarking and performance monitoring. That's where each year a department head would be expected in their annual report to note anything is in the comprehensive plan in the city and what their department has done, if they have performed in process, didn't follow the plan, etc. But I think that's part of the reporting process. It'll fall back to each individual department head. But there are some areas in this that there just isn't very much with respect to some of the functionality of the departments. Because when you look at the public facilities, sections about talking about police, you don't talk a whole lot about the police department or the fire department. It's really very conceptual-based plans of neighborhoods and corridors and broad goals of the environment and such, so that there is not the specificity that says, oh, we need 32 police officers, for example, or something like that. That's really not addressed in the comprehensive plan at all. So pick 5, let Melissa know. She'll tell the same to Wayne, and then we'll call Harry again.
Does anybody else
Harry,
have?
Harry was in and picked up his copy
I know he was in to pick it up.
about 2 weeks ago.
Does anybody here have any suggestions that they would like to make on how we approach this, other than me screaming, I can't read it another time, which is probably not a good way. Yes. And Felicia, quite right, I'm not sure I can.
Steve's going to volunteer to do it all.
He's going to read it all and tell us.
Right. As one of those department heads that the mayor
Okay, we want
referred
to
to,
know.
I would recommend that as soon as you establish which sections each commissioner is going to take, and then do a tentative identification of the dates that those will be considered, and then let us all take little bites, 5 bites instead of one big one. I think you'll get better. And then that'll give you an opportunity, too, to think of questions that you may want to ask, say, Nick Carr at Water and Sewer, as you go through your section. Is there something specifically that you want to know that he may not comment on necessarily when he's doing the review? So, and like the mayor said, this is easy information to disseminate at a staff meeting. Just to say, here's the schedule the Planning Commission is going to take. Here's the first section that we're going to do. Your comments are due by X date, and be prepared to respond to any question that a commissioner may have.
Right, because, for example, Stephen, like Chapter 5 of the general regulatory initiatives and talking about buffer yards and multifamily zoning and site plan, those are things you need to give us some feedback on too, because those are things that would follow And it's the same thing almost in the riparian corridors, the hillside protection regulations, the vistas, et cetera. I mean, how is that in relation to our code office approving building permits? Or what's in our regulations because of what's there?
I know part of, for example, what I'll review will be that if the city proposes to look at buffer yards differently, then that will take legislation too.
Right.
So there'll
Well,
be
we know that.
lots of
A lot of it is
recommendation on
going to
those
take
kinds of things.
legislation if you would
Because
go
it's not
through
just
the thing.
administrative policy or procedure
Yeah.
or guideline type things. It will actually need legislation to implement.
And there are suggested new ordinances in sections of this too.
Yeah, I still think that should have been in the appendix, but they didn't listen to me when I said that. They did put the statement in that approving the plan does not indicate that you are passing the ordinance or it has any force. They did put that in there. They didn't have that in there in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about the plan? Who wants to read it for me? He wants to read it for me.
Oh, no, I don't, actually. But I remember when the consultant was speaking to some of the committees, he suggested that the plan really wouldn't be all that efficacious unless there was a change in zoning, essentially, to reflect the thrust of the plan. Is the planning commission gonna look at that, look at the plan and say, okay, what should we do as far as the city's zoning code?
Well, that's one of the things we have to do. I mean, they're making suggestions here of what they think and what they think they heard at the meetings and that, but the city planning commission, the city council might not think so. And so it's conceivable that we would say here that we don't think that's either is practical, and no, we don't like that part. But if we do, if we find things that we think are good in zoning and that would mean you're gonna have to have legislation. So just, if we approved all of this the way it stands, and city council approved all of it the way it stands, very little could be accomplished because many things would have to be, it would have to be legislation, and you have to have public hearings, you have to notify all the people, and the planning commission has to do it, the city council has to do it. So I think if people read this and say, well, you know, if they approve it, everything's gonna be fine, it doesn't quite work that way.
Maybe that's why it says 2020.
That's what I think, 2020, that's why.
That's how long it'll take.
I had him put that there because I figure I won't live that long, so I won't have to worry about it. Right, Bud?
Exactly.
We're the same age, that's why I said
But I
that.
mean, with the plan as written, and this is presumably finally the final version of it, would it require significant changes in the zoning code to realize what that plan is calling for?
Well, some places I think it would. I mean, some places, no. There are places where it could be done, it's administratively, you wouldn't have to do any, you could do a number of things. But some of these things that call for changing zoning and all that sort of thing, you would have to do a great deal before you could ever accomplish that. And what I'm trying to say though is, as a planning commission, we may not think that that's a very good idea, what was recommended.
I mean, isn't this supposed to represent, you know, the will of the people? I mean, at least as much as you can get that.
As much as you can, but then again, all the people who went out there and talked about this aren't the ones who have been on the planning commission, have been on city council, and have worked with this for years and years and years, and may have some insight into things that the general public views things, of course, from their own personal interest. And sometimes you have to adjust those things. It's very nice what everybody said, but sometimes it's not practical. And people who've worked there for years and years wouldn't. The professionals say the water department man and the man who enforces all these things, the fire department, they may be able to, they look at something, we always ask them to look, and they can see something that the general public does not see. So, I mean, to say that that I personally, I don't know how he feels about it, I personally do not believe that we have to approve this exactly as written. We could say that, no, we don't think that part makes any sense practically, economically. I don't think the people who got on and who came to that ever thought that everything that they suggested to be in it, every plan I've ever seen, it's what you, ideally is what you would like to see your city do. And then it's turned over to the people who run the city, and they try as best they can to put all that into operation, but sometimes you can't. And I think most people understand you can't do everything. I mean, if it were a perfect world, we could just say, okay, this is all done. But it isn't. I don't mean that we're going to throw out everything that all the people said. They worked so hard. These people who came, all those meetings. I don't mean just the steering committee. I mean all those people who came to the big public meetings. We had really,
that's
really
kind
good
of my
turnout.
question. If
Yeah.
you've got this plan, if you've got this document, and then the planning commission looks at it and says, well, no, this just isn't practical. We can't enact something that will make this particular part of the plan happen. Why have it? Why have it in the plan?
Well, that's the question is, we perhaps will say we want something taken out, or we would put it in, you would have this section of, down the road, if possible, you might be able to implement something like this. But, you know, when you come right down to it, this whole plan, it revolves about how much money you have in the community and the city. How much money do we have to operate on? And, you know, sometimes you just can't do what you want to do. You do in your own family. I don't think everybody, unless you are the football coach, you don't have enough money to get that up. I hope they heard me say that. That, you know, you can't always have everything you want, and you still have it in your, you could keep it in your plan of this is something, if the situation would change, we'd have enough money, we'd have the land, we'd have the people to do all this thing. We would like to strive for this, but right now, this is all we can do.
I mean, the city has had plans before, which
Yeah.
I think by general agreement were just
But see,
unused documents.
no,
they
see,
said.
That's not true.
that's not true, because people say that it is not true. If you take those plans out, you will see that a great many things were accomplished with those things. It is just that people think, here, this is a plan, it's supposed to be perfect, and all that stuff's gonna happen. Well, there's no way all of the suggestions that they have in here are gonna happen. No way. There's
Well,
not enough money to do it.
I'm not sure that I understand the process. Is the planning commission's role, might they say, we'd like this part to be removed or altered in the plan before it's?
I don't know what we're going to do. We can do that. We
You
can
could
say,
suggest
if
amendments.
we want to, we can say, thank you very much. Would you put that in the file? No, by law, we could do that. But we're not gonna do it, but we could do that.
But I mean, you could suggest amendments or.
Well, it seems to me that we can. I don't think there are very many rules written about how this is done. We operate under state law, and there was a dispute about state law, whether or not the city council even had to look at the plan. The planning commission is charged with the city plan. This administration has been, we work together with the council and the city planning commission, work on the things together, because you can't do, neither one can do it alone, let's face it, you have to do it together. But I don't think that there's any law that says that we have to take this, we have to say up or down. You know, we say, okay, we accept this, or no, we don't accept it. I don't think there's anything that says that we can't say, we need to revise this, or we want to put something else in here that we feel that this is not, doesn't really address the problem. So, but I'm just talking, I don't know what the rest of the commission wants to do. There are 5 people on it, they have to all vote.
Is there a timetable on what's?
Before 2020.
Okay, so in the next 20 years. And
That's it.
you'll do, this will be in the form of what, a recommendation to council to adopt?
No,
or-
we have to adopt it.
We have to adopt it.
The commission has to.
or adopt it or modify it, et cetera. Same thing as the city council needs to do. But, I mean, I think, have you read it, Jim?
I have read large chunks of it. I can't
Yeah.
claim to have read
And
it.
I understand that, but I mean, what I'm saying is they got into some theory here, like take Route 50. There's a
It's
whole
very-
section
it's a
on
very
Route 50.
amorphous document.
There is really a lot of statements that's in there that are so really policy-driven by council. Do we want sewer lines where we do not have the billing authority on water lines? That's, if you say no to that, we have, then scrap that whole part of the plan. And that's a policy decision that city council has to make. We as a planning commission can make a recommendation to them on that, but there's a whole sect in there of, well, this isn't in the city now, but this is how we zone it. Well, how can we create a zone when it isn't even in the city?
Well, that was one
You know,
of the
I mean,
things I
there's-
wanted them to take out because.
There's stuff in there that, when you go into the detail with what part of what we would like to take a look at are things that, and get input from staff is, there's a nice statement in there, we should be a pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly community.
Which is very
But
nice.
that's never really defined as to how do you do that. And without some input from the staff saying, well, I've only got so many roads that are X wide that I actually can create bicycle lanes.
Right.
Or, do you want me to take the parking off of East State Street from College Street through Madison Ave, or actually through Home Street, so that we have no parking to create a bicycle lane? Well, obviously, that's not something that's a policy matter of city council to decide on something like that. Should it be in the plan, or are we going to interpret it that way? Who knows? I mean,
I'm sure there's probably some things, I think people have raised this issue that there's some language in there that maybe one goal is incompatible with another goal that's stated in the plan.
you know,
There's some of this development of Stimson and it would, some of the suggestions would take, there's not enough room down there to do all that stuff. And they want to take all of the parking off there and put all these things in, but that's an access point to the highway system.
Well, my question has just always been what the status of this plan is. I mean, obviously it's not legislation, it's not binding on anybody, it's a guideline.
It's a
but-
blueprint or a guideline to help you, help the people, the council and the commission, and the whole administration, all the technical people, a guide to them of how the people who worked on it very hard, and they did, and the suggestions that they made, what they would like to see, that you know how those people felt and what they are, and you can look at that and say, we will strive towards these things. But some of them are really, you can't, they just would not be possible.
I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time, but is there a process, is there a process set down somewhere as to what, supposing the planning commission wants to amend it or drop something out, is that specified anywhere how you do that? You have to send it back to the folks who cooked it up in the first place?
No,
and you just-
the last time, if I remember the last time, that last revision, I was on the committee, and quite frankly, Sarah was very unhappy with what came out, and she really rewrote a great deal of it, and that was then resubmitted, but didn't go back to the consultants. It was handled within the city administration and the people who she depended upon.
So the
and
commission could just make changes and then adopt
Well, as
the
far as,
amended document?
yeah, we can, there's nothing that says that we can't change this. As I'm saying,
And you would pass that on to council in the form that you,
we can tell them, we've studied this, we've got through this, we've discussed it. These are the things that we have a problem with this, all right? This is something that we think is going to be a problem, and this is what we recommend, recommend should be changed here. And that we will approve, we are going to approve this, but with our recommendation in it, that we're including what we say in there for you to.
Oh, so you would recommend to council that they adopt?
Well,
the
we're going to
version.
say, this is what we adopted, we didn't like this, and I think we should tell them, you know, I can say, I didn't like such and such and such and such here because just because I don't personally, I can't do that just because I don't like something. But based on actual needs of the city, what the city has, what the technical people, the people in all the departments tell us, and they look at it. And another thing is, I think another important thing, and this is how you start and you implement a plan, is how much you would have to, how much legislation would have to take place and the length of time it would take to do that. Now, sometimes that is counterproductive. There might be another way to improve what the people want improved with this change in ordinances. It's possible, you know, these things, this is not a short period of thing to do. It takes a long time to get those ordinances through, especially zoning and all, that takes a long time. But it may be that there's another way to reach the end that they suggest without going through that procedure. And that's something we need to look at is it in fact, is there a way to do this already on the books that we can do this? We don't need to change all this thing. It's already there. It may not be worded quite the same way, but it's already there. And I think that's why we want to divide it up. Everybody take their sections and really, I mean, look at it carefully. And the thing that I'm anxious to do is to have the other people on the commission look at it. Because we were both on there, and quite frankly, I mean, I don't know, I can't tell you how many times I've read it. How many times do you think you've read it, Ed? I mean, I don't.
Too many.
Too many. I
You're
mean,
saying you're on the steering committee?
Yes, yes, we two were on the steering
Both
committee.
of us have been on the steering committee, so we have more knowledge because the other three commission members,
Right.
none of them were on the steering committee. So this is, in essence, a new document to them.
And I'm anxious for that input myself. Did you?
I'm gonna say, I sort of think this isn't the plan, this is the proposal for a plan, which will be adopted by planning commission and city council. And then what you do with it, a lot of parts in the zoning requirements and the subdivision and the plan unit development say that this will be considered in light of the comprehensive plan. So this becomes then a guide for further actions to be taken on various things that requires some consideration of where you're going.
I really have to steel myself to read it again. Because I read it, in addition to reading it for what it said, I read it because I didn't like the way it was written.
For the money you paid for it, it should be a nice fat document.
Which should be done in a good format and grammatically correct. Okay, how many of you are going to take a chapter here to read? Okay, I don't see anybody leaping up to take a chapter.
What's next on the agenda?
There is nothing left on the agenda except for the minutes we don't have. And then
We couldn't approve anyway.
we
don't have
couldn't
a
approve
quorum.
because there are just two of us here.
So do you want to adjourn?
We might as well. We're going to adjourn. We have nobody to. You actually don't have to have a second
Right.
to adjourn. You can
Just
move
be
to
recognized
adjourn.
by the chair.
Yeah, I recognize
Okay,
you.
We do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We adjourned at